And this is the cornerstone of the Southgate Park barn. And then the next few pictures or slides actually show the Hartong barn. Of course, we all know the Hartongs, major farmers throughout the community. And this is what Green's main industry was farming and agriculture back in the 1800s. And it was nothing more than farming communities. And we are really fortunate that the names have been carried on, the heritage of the folks that their forefathers actually founded the township or the Green area and then built their barns and farms, and in this case they carried on. Jacob Humbert barn, which is now owned by Donna Gulford and her husband, or her father, Lawrence Gabrick, and I believe Lawrence is here this evening. And the barn was built in 1860. It went from being a dairy farm on into, the name of it now is Excalibur Arabians, and Donna raises Arabian horses there. We spent an afternoon with Mr. Gabrick himself, and he walked us through all the outbuildings that you're seeing here and had a story to tell about each one. It was very, very interesting day. The Pauline Frank's barn, which I'd like to say everyone's familiar with her property, but very beautiful, and you can see how a lot of these barns have been kept up, and the owners would be commended for maintaining the barns themselves. Looking on into the Towner barn, which is by the Towner family. This barn was built in 1900. And this barn has become what we will call a needy barn. And this barn, if you look at the barn, you see the vegetation growing up over the barn. This barn is a needy barn, and when you have the vegetation like that, that is what really hurts a barn quickly, along with the weather and rain and then lightning, which results to fire. When you get to this point, then you're looking at a major investment to repair the barn or bring it back. And we took some shots, just extra shots on the property, just to show some of the outbuildings that are still there. Blair barn, which is these folks just recently purchased this barn, and it's Brian and Shannon Kelly, which again we were there and toured the barn, and this family, Brian and Shannon, have every aspiration to actually restore the barn. They know that they have a needy barn, but they want to save it. And they called just this evening to say that they couldn't get back in town soon enough to be at our meeting here this evening. But the beautiful thing is meeting these folks and being able to take these pictures to show the audience what we have still standing in Green as far as some of these ancient barns. And I say ancient as far as 1800s. The Gilbert barn, which is owned by the Harry Gilbert family. We couldn't get too much information on that or them, but we still went out there and took these pictures. And some interesting buildings here that you don't see anymore. And one of the things about barns is based on industrialization and the mode of farming and the types of equipment is the reason why barns either they're not used like they were at one time, and different styles of barns are being built or outbuildings to house the equipment. And the old barns are just pretty much left go, or they're just maintained, and people that you have them just continue on using them the way they were used at one time. Going into the Hartong farm, there's a nice slide of their sign out front. I think this next slide shows the picture that was taken in 1911. This is a great picture, and it tells a story in itself. And we featured this picture in our presentation last year. But when you look at the attire that the people are dressed in, and the fencing and the animals, and just the way the hay is stacked up there in the center. You know, they actually pitch it up in the air, and the wind just takes it right into the barn. And this is a good story here, just looking at that particular barn. That was before, and if you go to the next slide, and you'll see the barn, how it looks today. Moving on to Lewis Herring Hiram Hartong Farm, which originally it was built in 1880, and Joe Forline's family purchased the farm in 1953-54. What you're looking at right there is Mr. Forline's barn has been adapted to a commercial use. And barns have either their present use as either adaptive, commercial, or they're using it as a barn as it was originally intended to be, or they're being dismantled and sold, or they just get old and fall down. Timber from barns is known and very purchased up quite a bit from the far west and even the far east. There are brokers that buy old barns before they fall down. People look at the barns, they say, well, for me to put this kind of money into it and bring it back, I don't want to do that. They sell it, and then it's dismantled. Take somebody like the Forlines here, they've used and run a business out of their barn for many years. I think they actually quit farming it and having animals there in the late 60s, early 70s. Next slide is Solomon Hartong Barn, William and Mary Lou Davis. This barn was built in 1880, excuse me. And then moving on to the Musser Barn, Shana Musser Coburn. This lady and her husband purchased this property from her father, and she has aspirations to be bringing the barn back. Met with her and talked, and she's interested in preserving the property. This particular barn is out on 241 Massillon Road, just south of Greensburg Square. Next barn is an interesting barn, Aaron Schwartz barn, and this Mr. and Mrs. Frank just had their home dedicated as a local landmark, and they are now going to be switching their focus to do what they can to bring their barn back and preserve the barn. We find there's been a lot of awareness brought to people's attention about their barns and just visiting and going out and seeing and talking with them. It just kind of seems, out of sight, out of mind, and a lot of folks just didn't realize that, hey, we got something here and we should take and do what we can to save it or preserve it. And there's been a lot of inquiry about barns. Moving down to Benjamin and Agnes Serbelis, we're looking here at the Emmerich barn. Now, this barn is over off of near Emmerich Road, and that's the only picture we could get of it, but it was built in 1837. We didn't have an opportunity to speak with any of the owners at this barn. Then we have the Jacobs barn, David Jacobs. 1912, this barn was built. We also moved around here and took a couple of other shots of some older buildings on. You got the Williams barn, Jerry and Mary Lou Williams. This particular barn was built in 1851, and beautiful barn, and it's used on a regular basis. Couldn't find too much information on the Kiefel barn. Shows that it was built in 1920, but we got back here, a few of us, and took some pictures I think would be of interest. One time you could tell it had the makings of a very thriving barn, but a lot of equipment, cars and whatnot back there, and you just kind of like they were just turned off and left there. And we got the Beard barn, then moving down to which was built in 1860 by Charles and Vicki Beard. Interesting barn coming up is the Bell Chapel barn, and Back in the late 40s, early 50s, the Chappells had up to 5,000 chickens at one time on their property. And they were the main supplier of chickens to Case Farms, Case Poultry, which at that time was in Kenmore. And they switched over to beef cattle and pigs, and they had a lot of pigs, and then they kind of just did their farming and got into horses, and then as the children graduated from school, they just kind of quit farming. And if you notice, there's a inset up here of the barn that was back in the 50s when they got it, when they bought it. And if you look closely at that picture, it shows a shed, which is still there, and then there's a chicken coop in the back, and the chicken coop has been rebuilt, but it was built to match what was there originally. What we really are trying to stress and look in the variety of the barns, and you see the Southgate barn, what a beautiful barn it is. I think I looked over the Bettler Farm barn, but that was taken down at Bettler Park. But the whole thrust, and we're going to hear from some of our friends from Ohio Barns that just kind of tell you a little bit about what Friends of Ohio Barns are. Paul, are you in the room? Paul Noble, would you mind coming up here for a minute? Paul Noble's with Friends of Ohio Barns, and he's going to just tell us a little bit about Friends of Ohio Barns and what they're all about. Paul?
I was going to wear the shirt. I just picked up Tractor Supply. It says, "What happens in the barn stays in the barn." But I thought I'd better not do that tonight to you. Friends of Ohio Barn was organized about 10 years ago, and my wife and I are charter members. In fact, we were the first life members. We don't have a barn, but I was born and raised on a farm, and we had a barn there as I grew up. As some of you heard here a few months ago when I talked. The Friend of Ohio Barn it's a nonprofit, 301c3, and the board members do most of the work, as happens in a lot of these organizations. And we're spread all the way across the state. I mean, we're from all corners of the state, so it makes it difficult for us to have meetings. We had one yesterday. We have them about twice a year face-to-face, and other than that, it's on the telephone with conference calls. We do a lot of them. Every month we get together and do that. One of the things we've done from day one is have a conference somewhere around, this year it'll be April 24th, 25th, no, 27th, my wedding anniversary. And this year it's going to be in Summit County for the first time. We've had it over in Worcester, Licking County, Bellefontaine, and you name it. It's been all over the state. But this year, Denny out here, who's manning the display out there, Denny and Jim, are working it up. It'll be up Cuyahoga Falls area, North Summit County, okay? We have a website, friendsofohiobarn.org. Keep tuned to that. Go in there and you'll see all the info on our organization and stuff. One thing I'd like to tell you about real quickly, well, when we have the conference, we have a Friday bus tour. We get 2 big buses, and we select 7 or 8 interesting barns. 1 or 2 of them will be adaptively reused barns that's been converted to either a house or something or other. One of them for sure will be a needy barn. That's where I come in. I've called it a needy barn because we've built a little group within the Friends of Ohio Barn called the Junior Barn Detectives. I insist on the word junior because we're not pros. What we're trying to do, myself and 2 other fellows, is establish a cadre of knowledgeable volunteers across the state that can go out and talk to folks. We put on displays like we got out here, and I've got my little mini barn that we had in the parade. You saw it on the float. That was up 109 times. That was the 109th time kids had put that little thing up. And it's starting to wear on me. So, and it can't be all over the state. So we use it at Malabar, down at the Algonquin Mill, and more locally. to draw attention to our FOB display. But it seems that the educators, the school teachers and all, found that they love it more for purposes of the kids having a good time putting it up. So we're planning on making, down the road, 10 models, quite similar to the one you'll see out there on the table, the Pennsylvania Bank Barn, but it'll probably be a 3-bay American thrashing barn, English thrashing barn, but it's going to be an American thrashing barn. There's different characteristics. The purpose of those being that I can give one of those to each of our JBD, Junior Barn Detectives, spread around the state for their use to take to schools, to take to meetings like this, to take to stuff like that. The uniqueness of the darn thing is that it's raisable. If we had time, and I do it once in a while, take the whole thing down and you got a pile of wood there and a pile of pegs, and people can put it up, raise it just like a real barn. That's what they do with the model you saw on the trailer. So this will make that concept that much more available across the state, and hopefully we can encourage more people to do the maintenance necessary on their barn, and before they call the barn hawks to come chop it up with a chainsaw, talk to them and be able to encourage them to save it somehow or another, even move it someplace. Lots of options, but none of them usually, when they get that bad, are cheap. So basically that's what Friends Ohio Barn is. We're going to be out here. All kind of questions, we're ready to answer them. So, BJ attended our second training session for the Junior Barn Detectives. So he doesn't have his badge on, but he's authorized.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a great organization, and there's some other representatives here from Friends of Ohio Barn, so I encourage everyone to at least stop by their table and talk with them, and thank you again, Paul. You know, agriculture was very important many years ago, but it's just important today. And, you know, there's an old saying, if you can read, you know, thank a teacher, but if you're eating anything today, you can thank a farmer. And I'd like to introduce a personal friend of mine and the representative from the Ohio Farm Bureau, Nick Kennedy. Would you mind stepping up here, Nick, and just... Nick, thank you.
Well, good evening. My name is Nick Kennedy, and I'm the organization director for the Summit County Farm Bureau. I'm also the director for Stark, Portage, and Columbiana County Farm Bureaus. And I get the opportunity to see a lot of these barns that you saw today. Get to work with some good people like Dean and Mr. Gabrick and some other folks here in the county. But our organization is a nonprofit organization, and you might see this logo that's up on the screen a little more often. The county farm bureaus don't necessarily have their own logo. But we have 87 county farm bureaus. I know we have 88 counties, but we have 2 counties that, due to the size of the population, decided to form one county farm bureau. That's Jackson and Vinton County down in Southern Ohio. And our mission as a farm bureau is to help educate consumers about the importance of agriculture, the importance of where their food comes from. We take it for granted a lot of times when we go to the grocery store. It's very available to us at any time. Our grocery stores are open 24 hours a day. With these products that are grown by the farmers. Everything we eat started out with a farmer. And yet, in our school systems, we're getting rid of our ag programs, we're getting rid of our food programs, and our kids are not understanding where their food is coming from. And so in this particular county, in Summit County, we have over 8,100 members. Anybody can be a member. You don't have to be a farmer. In the state, we have about 215,000 members. Only 60,000 of those are farmers. The rest are non-farmers. So we have a lot more non-farmers that are members. And it's an annual membership of, in this county, $63. And what that gets you is, at the very beginning part, I guess, would be some publications that we'll send out to you to keep you educated about what's going on in agriculture. So there are some member benefits that we do have that are available, some pretty nice ones. But here locally, what you're helping to support by being a member is we've got a myriad of things that we do educationally. Right now, next week we have the Summit County Fair, so I hope you all are planning to attend. This is a nice little segue what we're talking about, the history here, we have a farm museum out at the Summit County Fair. It's been there for 20 years, and we've been working diligently here in the last few weeks to get it cleaned up and dusted off and ready for business next week. But to come out and just see some of the old farm machinery, some of the old ways that life used to be like, and we'd like to help promote that. And at the same time, we're taking the opportunity to educate the folks about what these different things are part of. And we also have here in the county what's called the Summit County Mobile Learning Lab, or we'd like to call it the Agmobile. We all know what a bookmobile is, goes around to the various schools and libraries to sell books. Well, we have an Agmobile. We don't sell anything. We're just teaching about agriculture. We pull up to schools, usually for 2, maybe 3 days, and we run all the kids through this trailer, and they can take hands-on experiences with agriculture. They can make ice cream, they can see and touch wool, touch other farm products, and get to learn about those products. Here, hopefully in the next few weeks at the Akron Zoo, we've built a kiosk with a little touch screen on it that you'll be able to play some educational games at the zoo. The Akron Zoo this past May opened up a farm animal exhibit, and we're going to help kind of go along with that whole plan that they have and putting this kiosk there to help get some games that will educate the kids and even adults. Sometimes we all forget about where our food comes from or how it might have gotten there. And also to talk about some of the machinery that you're seeing now. I'm picking on Dean just because I like to pick on Mr. Hartong. But I'm sure Dean could tell you that life's changed quite a bit from the time he started farming to now, and the machines are a lot different. So we want to educate what these big green and red things are out in the fields and what they do and how they work with that. We also work with Copley Feed, Graft Growers, and Dayton Nursery. Just so far, we're hoping to branch out a little bit further to some more folks, but we do some educational seminars to the public. You don't have to be a member. We don't, unfortunately, send you a mailing directly unless you are a member. You'll get the mailing. But we do some educational seminars if you're looking to get into raising some poultry or raising different types of animals or gardening or canning, you name it. And we usually do about a dozen of those each year. And so you're helping to, with your dues in our organization, you're helping to help support that. We also do have a youth program. We just recently had, which I got to attend, was the youth camp down at Camp Muskingum down on Leesville Lake in Carroll County. And we had about 125 youth that were down there learning about agriculture, learning about being good leaders and going back out into the community and staying involved in agriculture. I grew up in Northwest Ohio. My family directly was not on the farm, but my extended family was. But I personally didn't want to, and no offense, Dean, be a dairy farmer the rest of my life. I wanted something a little bit more, and so here I am today working for the Ohio Farm Bureau. Unfortunately, our farmers are tending to get that age range, that average age range is growing because we don't have a lot of young people involved. And we want to encourage them that yes, it is a hard life to live, but it's a great one. And you can learn a lot and you can appreciate life a lot more if you are involved in agriculture. And so we do a lot of other things. I could stand up here for probably a half hour, and I know BJ would probably kick me off the stage here, but I'll be out here at the table if you have any more questions or would like to talk a little bit more. Thanks for your time.
Well, I have the pleasure now to introduce to you a couple that I've come to know in the last year and a half, and as Nick just mentioned, they're farmers. They have their family that have farmed, and their children are farming, and they've got quite a story to tell, and it's not all a bed of roses, and anybody will know that for any farmer, but I'd like for John and Lee Beast to come up here and have a part of this program as we move forward. Yeah, I'd like to give them a warm welcome here. They've done a very...
We'll let John have that mic.
This, you're going to see this film on this barn raising, and I look out here, and a number of you seen it, and there's one thing I'd like to say, and Larry and Dean and the other people here were here also, that Jerry Williams, he's not here, but certainly Mary Lou is, that this barn raising thing is an experience much beyond the mechanization of putting this timber together and mortise and tenon and pegs and that sort of thing. These guys spent a lot of time with us when this barn burned down. The fire department, you know, I begged them to let this fire burn. I mean, because it would be just a lot easier to do the work that had to be done to prepare for rebuilding a barn. Whatever reason, that can't happen. They called overhauling, and they brought in bulldozers and put in a lot of water and crushed everything, and it made it really tough to clean up. But these fellows back here were a big part of help. I mean, it took several days to get through this, 2, 3, 4 days. And Lee and I then went down to Kidron. We knew that we were going to immediately rebuild this barn, and we did not turn toward any commercial endeavor. We just thought that's what we wanted to do, was it not? And we went down there. We met Josie Miller. He's a barn builder, and the way this is done, we worked with Josie, and he took me down to see Abe Miller. First I met Josie, and then we go down to see Abe Miller down in Farmerstown, and the way this whole thing worked was, to me it was a very warm, almost a religious experience, because we're working on trust, there's no contract, none of that. I mean, it just, today, the way things are, and this was only 30 years ago, and I think in that Amish and Mennonite community, God bless them, a lot of that does still exist, although they're much more commercial now than they were then. But we went down to see Abe Miller in Farmerstown, and Josie Miller's there, and he says, Abe, this is 20 piece, and you know, the old Dutch thing. I want you to cut out a barn for him. Now, if he doesn't make it good, we'll find another place to put it. And that's the way it went. That's exactly the way it went. We gave them the dimensions, and away they go. And Oh, I'm not even looking at that. I'm sorry. I didn't know this thing was running. I'm sorry. I didn't know that.
Okay.
But there it is. Well, can you hold that thing up a minute so I can kind of get to where we are? Let me just because I think, I mean, this is interesting, but knowing how this thing happened, I think, is pretty meaningful also. Thank you, BJ. But anyhow, we started cutting out the timber, and what you're going to see here is a structure very much like a cardboard box, because you lay one, and the sections in the barn that divide one mile from another, they're called a bent. And that's simply a dividing, it's structural obviously, but that divides 1 mile from the other. You have 4 bents, 5 bents, 6 bents, whatever you have, and determines the length of your barn, because generally, very generally, these are 17 or 18 foot spans in there. So they came up and they laid this down, and this timber comes out of Farmerstown, and it's cut, and the only thing they're using are awls, which were gasoline driven, and a carpenter's square. And these guys are doing this and that and that, and they're marking this timber, and they're drilling the mortise and shaping the tenon. And then we have, there's a gentleman down in Holmes County that in these days, his thing was to supply the octagonal hickory pegs that drove in. I mean, that was his business. He's the peg maker. Now today you can go down and buy these pegs for $5 a pop or something like that. But that's the way it all started. So they started cutting this thing out, and they had this thing all laid out in the barnyard there, and they put it all together, and we carry these individual pieces up there. And at this time the crew was only probably
5 men.
five guys. And this gets moved up to, we had done the foundation, and the floor joists were in, and support posts were in, and that sort of thing. And they put down a floor, nothing's nailed down, but they began stacking this up one on top of another. Now you can start this up again, because that's about where we are. But it really is, it's quite something. Yeah. Taking right off here, BJ. There we go. Now this is, it's after dawn, it's just early in the morning, and these guys are just starting to show up. And the first thing they do is they gather. We used to have music on this thing. BJ took it off, and rightfully so, because it was terrible. But now what you see right here, this is a vertical siding that you see in this picture right here. And these, the nailers, which are the horizontal members, on the vertical structure. The horizontal members are nominally 40 inches apart, and they're driving these nails. They're starting all these nails on those joints, on those 40-inch spans, and they're partially embedded, so that as we go further on, you're going to see these are put up in the air, and these guys grab these things and nail them to the horizontal members. This is a picture of whom I don't know, but in fact, there were so many guys I can't remember. But
Wait.
what?
They started at 6:30 in the morning. The first crew of Amishmen arrived at 6:30 in the morning, and there were about 30 of them. And these were the original, the guys that had cut out the barn and a few other of their
Plus
helpers.
another couple dozen.
We ended up with 144, but at 6:30 in the morning, and that's why you will see the east side of the barn goes up in 2 sections instead of 1, because they didn't have enough men, and they wanted to just get it done. It started at 6:30 in the morning, and at 5 o'clock at night, we had a barn. And we had a barn, roofed. It was finished, basically finished, except for the ridge cap on the roof.
Yeah, the ridge cap, and we had
But
some.
there you are. You may have it now. But these are the first guys that came in.
But here you can see the spacing on it with the nails on it that I'm talking about, and the truck you just saw come down the lane, we'd had a flat tire on the tractor, and somebody came to fix that flat tire. But this is simply preparing the sidewalls, the material to go up, and that's my now deceased brother in that picture on my left side there, my brother Bill, and there's a lot of this. There's an awful lot of this nailing and prep work before this structure is raised, because when the barn goes up, when the walls go up, before all the walls are up, they're starting to put up the vertical siding.
Siding up,
And they're stacking, I don't know what to say here, they're
yeah.
stacking.
And you know, it's important to know that everybody, all 144 men that we had, everybody knew what they were to do. There was no one saying, hey, you know, Joe, go over here, or Sam, go over here. It was everybody knew their place, and this is apparently the way that the Amish do it. They all knew, from the little guys, and there were some young boys, their job was putting the floor down in the mow. And the older guys, there were some older Amish, their job was building doors, and they started building the sliding early, soon as they get there. They just know what to do. And
Yeah,
this was the first section that went up, and this went up at about 8 o'clock in the morning. John wasn't even here at that time. He was down with the bus picking up the other 144.
Yeah, well, I mean,
140, whatever it was,
obviously, there were a
yeah.
lot of drivers among
Lot
these,
of
you know, the Mennonites drive and the Amish don't. That's one of the differences in their orders. But the east side went up first, and soon you're going to see they're going to begin nailing on that east side. And you know, BJ did take the music off of it, because the guy that did this for us, these are all telephoto pictures. The camera was way back down at the house. We didn't want to intrude. I mean, they are sensitive, and they're still today, particularly the Amish, are very sensitive to imaging and that sort of thing. So we did this. This is all telephoto. But what's missing now with the absence of the music, and they're all speaking German.
It's all
Are the barn master, the build master, it yells out these instructions, and it's kind of a shame, BJ, that part of it's gone, because that was really interesting, and the energy you hear, as you can see when they're shoving up these sidewalls, and we got ropes on one side and the guys with these pikes on the other side pushing these up. Now this is out of place, and we're gonna move it into place, and it'll drop in and stay there forever, I hope. But the German, of course they speak English too, and they call us. I'm sure you probably know, if you've had any experience with the Mennonites and the Amish, we are the English. That's how they address us. And you see these are pretty flexible until they get them put together.
and everything fit.
Oh
They
yeah,
didn't
it's
have-
amazing. I mean, you know.
They didn't have to recut anything, not one.
Not one thing. And I said earlier, they've got these carpenter squares out there, and they've got this thing like that, and they're marking this thing out, and they've got their dimensions, and it just all goes together. Now, these are not really that tight, these joins, that's for sure, but so they have much more leeway than you with a metal structure and you're riveting or something like that. But boy, they just slip in there and go together. Now they'll put that top beam across that center section there, and then pretty soon these bents that you see lying on the floor there, and you can see them stacked up there, and these are going to start to unfold. And as that happens, pretty soon we're going to start putting on some siding. There's one great picture you're going to see in a minute from the south side of the barn. They're tossing these pegs up to these guys that are putting it in. This is the door side, the mouth side on the west that they're pulling up now.
And this is
pulling
when
and pushing.
Everybody was here now at this
I think
point.
we've got most of 'em here,
Most
yeah.
of the they were here. And so the whole side, the opposite, the west side went up all in one piece.
There was, in this session we see right here, Josie Miller was not there that day. He had become ill, so he wasn't there. So it was another Miller that, needless to say, that was doing the guiding and yelling and so on and so forth. But there was an awful lot of loud German
And
and
it was all in German.
all in German, and it was just a great happening. You know what, Jerry? Yeah, the timber was all cut, and the timber, it's many different kinds. I mean, we got maple, and we've got gum, and obviously we have some good oak in there too, but it's not all oak by a long shot. Some hickory in there. And this is fresh wood. I mean, this is wet wood.
Right out of the.
Yeah, it is
Right
wet,
out of
and that's one of the keys to it, and that's kind of usual because when these pegs are driven in, then there's a lot of shrinkage, and that really tends to tighten the thing up. But we've just been doing some work downstairs and rebuilding some stalls and things like that, and boy, it's, I mean, as these guys know, it's like, yeah, it is tough timber now, I'll tell you that. But it's quite soft here. I mean, it's wet. Yeah. The foundation, yeah, in large part is original. Yeah, very much so. That was what we were able to save, and getting this bulldozer in there was not a good deal, I'll tell you that, but that's what they needed to do. Now you can see some brick there, and this is where they actually went through, and this is from the south side, and they did really demolish that. I mean, we didn't lose that in the fire. We lost that to the fire department. And but it's part of what has to be done. Now look at this tie. You see this tie in the center at the top? Hold on here, BJ. And you can see that tie, and you can see the shape of it. It's not straight. Can you see the belly in there? Now understand the Amish built this, and they build these barns for their methodology, the way they're going to use the barn. That's called a fish belly tie. And as building a bridge, as it goes into compression, the belly is out, excuse me, so that when the pressure of mowed hay, everybody bales now, but a lot of Amish still, that's pressing out on that sidewall. Boy, excuse me. And it's going into compression, and that's why it's built that way. Fish belly tie. Go ahead, BJ, or whomever's running this camera.
See how absolutely everything fit. I mean, it was just, look at all the holes that were drilled for the peg. They hand drilled them. It was just incredible.
Oh yeah, I mean it's teamwork.
Well, maybe it's because they've done a lot of them too.
And as we went through this process, and we had to go down and invite these people, and that was another thing that we learned. This is rather a social event, really, for them, as well as reaching out to their fellow man, which is really the core of what it's all about.
This is
Uh,
where you're going to see the.
And
peg
I'll
that
get,
fits.
yeah, here we go. Now, we're gonna throw a peg up here. He's gonna miss it. The guy below him grabs it and drives it into his hole instead of the guy up above.
There you go. It's right in this. Look, very
There you
good.
go. Now he misses it. Next guy gets it, and he's got it.
He's in his hole.
Yeah. Well, we'll take it. That's okay, Simon. I can use it. And that's the north end you see there that's just been put up. And now after that, now we have four sides of this, and now the interior vents begin to be put up. Now the process of siding is starting, and you've got a guy on every nailer, and away they go. And I mean, in zero time. This is Mark Ternosky, by the way. Some of you know
In the middle with the
who
yellow hat. Second guy
who that
down.
is. Yeah. Now that's the south end of the barn. No. You know, the idea is you want air. Yeah, I mean, you can really see through these suckers, and no tongue and groove at all.
See how all the lumber for the siding is stacked and it all has nails in it? And so they just hand it up and the guys up there just hit the nails in. I mean, it's amazing what they do, or how they do it, how many they've done, I guess.
But we had the experience of being invited to go to these barn raisings, and we were expected, after we knew what was going to happen at our place, you become a little part of that community down there, which is a wonderful experience. But we did, what, 2 or 3, Lee, Mark and I, and went down and got into this thing, and I mean, it is just something else. I mean, it is.
It truly is a social event for them. And when we were told that to get the Amish to raise the barn, we needed to invite them to come, and you have to do it. You don't just send out a little notice. You have to go down, and we knocked on doors.
Oh, man,
and
yeah.
Josie Miller took us. He always went with us, but always the first thing that they would say, do we need to bring our dinner? And Josie had told us about this before. No, we will provide dinner. Let me tell you, that was an experience. Because
Now
we-
here's a vent being raised here. Now this now we're on the interior of the barn here. But you know, most of you know, of course, I'm on this planning commission here in Green, and can you imagine standing in front of some poor bugger coming up to this planning commission saying,
I'm going to build a
"I'm going to build a barn," and you.
I guess we were lucky it happened before we were a city. No permit. We didn't get a permit.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah, well, my gosh, aren't we grandfathered in? It was there.
Not one of them has a hard hat.
No.
No.
But most of them are wearing glasses.
Yeah, they've got their safety glasses on.
Right.
They need that because none of them see real well sometimes. Now, this is a barn door that's being built here. But now, it's not yet noon
It's not.
in this picture right here. We'll get there in a moment. And they all go down the house, and the way Lee had it set up, we opened one door, and they came in one side and went through the kitchen and
Went through the mudroom, washed their hands,
Yeah.
then went into the. we
and
took
I mean, how
everything
many
out of the
people helped you
family
put
room.
that food all together? I mean, you had.
Oh, about
you know.
25,
Yeah, I mean,
25, all
just-
family, and we did it.
And
This
I'll
is
tell
at
you,
lunch. This is at noon.
yeah, here we go.
And here they're standing in line, going down, in through across the terrace.
And they love ice cream. Boy, you
Oh
could
my
just,
God.
they just,
I had 56 pies, and there was not one piece of pie left. Not one. Not one piece of pie, not one scoop of ice cream. They sat outside on the lawn there and ate.
Now, one of the amazing things, wasn't there a picture of the hats in the bushes here?
No,
Don't I
think
remember
that's,
that?
in one of those pictures. All their hats were on the bushes. They all, and they all look alike.
Yeah,
to
these
us.
hats look alike to me, and everybody throw their hat out, and they all got their hats back. Now, you can see when they build this, you know, there's nothing cut in for any of the louvers or ventilators or anything, nothing like that. They just go up and cut it out between the nailers, and bang, in it goes.
This was around 3 o'clock because around 3 they started leaving. People started leaving because they were done with their job. So I'm sorry there's not a shot of all the young boys that were inside the barn, you know, up to about 13. They were in the mow laying the floor down. And they were all in a line, and then they would gradually go along one board, one board. And this is, these were all cut out that day. This is the south end of the barn, John?
Mhm.
Yeah. This is pretty much the end of the
That's the
day.
north end of the barn.
North end, yeah.
Yeah. Pardon?
1 day,
Oh, yeah, this is 1 day.
1 day.
And this is not a really terribly long day. I mean, nominally,
Well, they
6:30
was
to
at
4:30.
6:30 to, by 5 o'clock, they were really.
Yeah, they were gone.
And you know, the other neat thing that they do, they take home 10 nails each, unless they've hit a finger with a hammer or something. And then they have, for each time that they hit their finger, they take one off. But they all go home. They have a little pocket, and they take nails home. It was, yeah, now this is the morning, this is
No,
the
no,
morning
is this the
after.
morning after, or is this the, no, I
think
think,
it is.
honey, this is the afternoon.
No, I think it's the morning
No,
after.
I don't think so.
You're going to see You and I, and it was the next morning that.
Was that right?
There's Duchess.
What's the dimensions of the barn?
It is 5 times, I think it's 85 by 34.
5 bays.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was 5.
85 by 34, I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
They
but-
didn't, we put shingles, they shingled it that day. And they wanted to put Josie wanted to put a metal roof on it, which, you know, actually right now I'd say would be really nice. But he just kept calling the shingles, oh.
That it's finished, and we've got some lovely, wonderful friends. Truly, I mean, truly, this has been a very emotional experience, as well as physical. We're grateful to a lot of people.
And we loved our barn that we
We love
lost,
it, that's
but we
right.
love this one more
It's ours.
because it's ours. And it is a beautiful barn.
That's right.
Thanks to Josie, Josie Miller.
We-
had a rabbit going
we
up
do
the
have.
barn. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
I rescued it, and I had it tucked in my shirt. A little rabbit. Yeah. It was an
Mr.
experience.
Ralph Raymond-Schneider did that sign there for us. Yeah. But that's it, guys. Does anybody have any questions that we can share with you? Any questions at all? But it was one of the things that I do want to share with you is you know, how do you pay for this? I mean, we paid Abe Miller, he cut the timber out. We
Yeah.
paid Josie Miller, he was the quote barn builder. So he had all this activity you see here.
Nobody.
These guys are not expecting for us to send them a check or be paid. This is absolutely just out of kindness for another guy, another farmer. You know, they lost something and we're going to help you take care of it. And the way we address that, because you certainly can't walk away, there is an obligation, it's moral if nothing else, is that Josie took us to see because we asked Josie, I mean, we always asking Josie Miller, what do you do? Because we were dumb English and we didn't know what to do. But we went to we met the bishop, And the bishop gave us the guidance, and you end
We
up
made a donation.
making a donation
To
to
the
the church. And their church is not like our churches, you know, they're meeting in homes and things of that nature. And not all these gentlemen are in the same church, so to speak. But they got it all handled. And, but it was unbelievable experience. Okay.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Oh, no, yeah, this is great. These programs that were distributed, they were prepared by members of the Historical Society, and tried to just give a tribute to John and Lee on their historic barn.
Yeah, you got son Matt here too.
Yeah, I see Matt. Yeah, we got to give congratulations to Matt for a couple things, right, Matt? And, Matt recently got married, and stand up, Matt. Yep. Matter of fact, I understand you got married in the barn, huh?
We did get married.
Yeah.
We had reception.
Had a big reception in the barn, yeah. Great. So everybody got a program. These PowerPoints, copies, if anyone's interested, we're going to have, give your name to Glenn Witzman, and he'll see that you get a copy if you're interested in any of the pictures or whatnot. Our next meeting, the Green Historical Society, their meeting is going to be August 15th. It's the third Monday. We're going to have a meeting at 7 o'clock at the John Torek Senior Center. Now, our meeting in August is a general meeting. However, we are beginning to have about a 20-minute presentation on something historic to Green. And we haven't decided what the feature is going to be at our August meeting, but instead of having just a business meeting per se, we want to, some of our members or board members, officers, are going to make a real solid presentation on history. And then we'll go into a business meeting, and if you want to stay for the business meeting, great. If you don't, it's okay, you know, but we're a 501c3 now. We became that this past year. And part of that is we have to have a pretty solid business meeting, 3 or 4 a year. And we just kind of took the liberty to say, hey, you know, at the beginning of those meetings, let's do something historically speaking as far as presentation. Now, this is just hot off the presses, but you'll see these starting to appear around on our website. And September 24th, we are setting up, and it's really just, this is really just came up this week. We're going to do a bus tour. And I say we, we've got a narrator, and we've got Cleveland Southeast Trails, executive coach, and we're going to do a tour, a historic tour of Green. Now we're going to take in some historic places, homes that are still up, some barns, and historic sites, and we're pretty excited about it. It's going to start out in the morning at Figaro's Market, and it's going to end up around lunchtime. So tickets haven't gone on sale yet, but like I said, we just decided on the date, and we got some ideas as to where we're going, and if anybody has any ideas that you want to add to it, you know, we're all ears, because right now, the only thing we got for sure is the date and the starting and the ending spot. This evening, again, before we adjourn, I would really be grateful if you could spend some time at our Friends of Ohio's barns exhibit out there, and of course our Farm Bureau display. But you know, as John mentioned, and Nick and Paul, you know, this is a nice community of folks right here that come together, and I personally thank you on behalf of the Green Historical Society for carving out the evening and coming forward tonight and giving us your hour and a half. And if there's any questions at all, please, there's going to be Historical Society members. We're milling around. Grab us, ask us anything right now anybody wants to ask. I don't think, Vicki, you got anything? Vice President here, you all right? Okay. Well, I think our meeting then will be adjourned at this point. And again, I give you all a very warm thank you for attending and tuning in. And have a good evening. And watch our website.